I'll give over Anna to show us the presentation from Andres. Anna?
Yes, hello. Let me share the presentation. So Andres del Castillo works for CL, the Center of International Studies for the Environment. He was present at UNEA 5.2 in February. I was also there. And we are basically talking about the resolution that was approved that is called the End Plastic Pollution towards an international legally binding instrument. This resolution was discussed at UNEA 5.2, and we see this, I think you see in his presentation as well, as a major victory for the environmentalists, and also a major victory towards addressing the production of plastics and thinking about plastic pollution in a broader way. This resolution also had the waste workers included as a source of expertise, which is the first time that that happens in an international agreement like that. So I'm going to share the screen with Andres' presentation. Wait, it's giving me a message. I need to solve something here apparently. 1 second. Zoom has made some updates recently. And I think they also changed the way that we share a video. So give me 1 second because I just found it. Yeah, just 1 second. Let me try to solve this.
No problem, but in the meantime, for those who are here, maybe you can drop a message on the group, in the chat, you can tell us what you're expecting to come out of this conversation. If there's anything in particular, any questions or anything in particular that you are looking to have answers to, it would be great to just, sort of weigh out what's audience feeling or what are they thinking about. So just drop it in the chat box and I'll be happy to read through it maybe after we watch Andres' presentation. Okay. While that's happening, actually, you can drop the questions still.
I need to double check if you guys can actually see.
I'll mute myself. Anna, over to you.
Sorry. I need to double check if you can actually hear the sound from the presentation. Can you hear anything? Can someone please confirm if you can hear the sound?
Can you play it? I think it paused. Let's see. I can't hear anything just yet.
You cannot hear. Okay, so give me a second. I need to redo the sharing.
Okay.
Okay, let's try again. Can you hear the sound?
Is it playing?
Yes, it is playing. Let me restart the application. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Technology.
I know, right? For everyone else who's here, I see there's 19 of us in total. Maybe you can drop off. I can start as we're waiting. I am Dina. I'm going to introduce myself in the chat box. Please feel free to do that as well. Just and maybe if you'd like to share your information, not your personal information, but if you'd like to stay in touch with, feel free to do that.
Okay, I think it will work now. Let's see, I did everything that Zoom asked me to do. So let's hope for the best.
Other local communities can come
Yes,
together and continue this journey. Somebody say that we qualified to the World Cup, now we need to play it. This is what happened 1 month ago. We have something called a mandate, and we are going to define and talk a little bit what it means and what it means for the future, right? The title of the presentation is End Plastic Pollution Towards an International Legally Binding Instrument. And that was the title that we used for many, many years, trying to be aspirational, saying this is what we need, right? And now this is the title of the resolution adopted by 175 states. So it's important because it's itself a political statement. When you see the title, you understand what is the ambition of what they want. And it's clear that it's a plastic treaty, and it's clear that they want something to end plastic pollution. That is the overall statement. So from even the title, we can already see the measure the ambitions of what is inside, right? We're gonna walk and talk on, and I will be able to share this presentation with you. Then every time that you see an image here, you can click and you will have access to the documents that I'm announcing here. We're gonna talk about the mandate, what it means, and then we're gonna discuss a little bit the relation between the mandate and the content of the future treaty, right? But there is a publication that we produced together with the Environmental Investigation Agency and Gaia on what can be the content of a plastic treaty. And then most recent publication that we produced at CIEL on the typology of international instruments, meaning what it means a treaty, what is the meaning of a convention, what is those meanings of an agreement, of many things that people don't understand. Even us at the beginning say, okay, what will be the title? Is the title defining the content on or the legally binding nature or not? And also what can be the best shape or the best container to hold that content of the treaty in order to have something feasible but effective at the same time, and that apply almost immediately after the adoption and future ratification. So, but before that, I wanted to share with you, and I just realized that the title, I put the title in Spanish, but the content is in English. That is the different resolutions that were adopted at UNEA, because there are 14 resolutions that were adopted and that will be linked after to the plastic treaty. One of the first, I just selected 5 of those resolutions. One of the first one is nature-based solutions for supporting sustainable development. This is an important resolution because for the first time, states agree by consensus on a definition of what it means nature-based solutions, right? And also they recognize the potential of sustainable and some bio-based products, innovation and technologies that can result from nature-based solutions, but also recognize the potential risk associated with local communities and indigenous peoples. And this is important because substitutes and alternative to plastics will need to come from somewhere, right? And we need safeguards to make sure that there is not a human rights violation or abuses, and that there are shared benefits. There are different aspects that need to be linked with what will be the future after and the life after plastics, right? And then there is a second resolution on the sound management of chemicals and waste that again recognize and try to work and shape the question of sustainable consumption and production. And at the same time requests UNEP and the World Health Organization to update an important report on endocrine disrupting chemicals that was released in 2012. So for the next UNEA, I imagine will be 2024, we're going to have a new version of this report on chemicals and endocrine disrupting substances. So there is a third resolution that was adopted to have a scientific or science policy panel on chemicals, waste, and plastic prevention, prevention of pollution. This is important because this will be kind of the interface science policy panel that exists for climate change. It's called the IPCC, and exists for biodiversity. It's called IPBES, but doesn't exist for chemicals. So this will be a process that will go together or jointly or at the same time in parallel with the treaty process. And during the negotiation of the treaty process for the plastic, we will have this question of, okay, what will be the mechanism or interface that will inform through science the policy or the decision makers on things that need to happen. We need an external one or an internal one for the specifically for plastics, or this one will be enough. So that discussion will appear in the next 2 years. And there are other resolutions that they don't have enough meat for, on my opinion, to talk, but it's important to have that in mind. One on circular economy and the other on sustainable and resilient infrastructure. As you know, there is a big portion of plastic that is used and will be used on infrastructure. And we have here one of the bad guys, that is PVC, right? So what it means, sustainable and resilient infrastructure, and what is the future of different polymers or resins like PVC. Now, the mandate. So there are different things that usually you have in a mandate, like the scope of negotiations. And the scope was defined in general and was a big discussion. And now is plastic pollution is the scope, including in the marine environment. And we have an example already in one international treaty that have this approach, and it's the UN Convention on Desertification. This is a convention that is global, is general, but have a particular focus on Africa, right? So here we will see a convention that will focus on plastic pollution on all environments, but will have a specific focus on the marine environment there. This is important to highlight. Then the legal nature is clear from the title, international legally binding instrument. Then the title after will be treaty, convention, covenant, but agreement. We will see, and that will be a discussion, but the title won't define the legal nature of the international instrument. Will be the content. So the provisions will be, we're going to have a legally binding instrument with both mandatory and non-mandatory approaches, or binding and voluntary approaches. So doesn't mean that everything in the treaty will be legally binding and will have strict obligations or duty for governments. Sometimes we will find provisions with voluntary approaches there. The question is which provisions, and this is what we need to discuss in the next 2.5 years. And then in a mandate, we have also a target completion date. And for this treaty, the framework, the time frame is the first meeting will happen in the second part of 2022, and the last meeting will be at the end of 2024. This is a narrow window, but this demonstrates again the ambition that countries have for this treaty, right? And then we get to something more complex, that is the timeline here. And in the part, the question is where we are right now. And you see one specific part where we highlight what just happened, 2 meetings before UNEA, or the United Nations Environmental Assembly, and then the open-ended Committee of Permanent Representative. That is where all the substance discussion happened. That was the week before UNEA. Now we are in a moment where things need to be defined. For instance, Senegal announced that they wanted to hold the first meeting that won't be a negotiation meeting, will be a preparatory meeting that will take place between May and June. And so far, we are not sure when and if that will happen at the end or not in Senegal, but that is the idea. So there are other meetings that will happen this year that have a specific relation with the topic of the plastic treaty. That is the Stockholm Plus 50, and then the UN Conference on Oceans. Those 2 conferences could be relevant for advancing this intersectional work on discussion to build consensus, to prepare kind of the sauce that need to be ready for the first INC that will happen at the second half of 2022. INC, Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. That is the name of the body, and that will meet 5 times from now to the end of 2024. Is what we have so far as information. And with the last meeting of the INC that will happen at the second half of 2024 is not the end. There is another meeting called the Diplomatic Conference, or Conference of Plenipotentiaries. That is the conference where the treaty is adopted and signed finally by the different member states. And this ceremony or this meeting will happen in the first part of the year of 2025. So those are dates that are important to have. The rounds of negotiations are important, will be between 3 and 5 days of rounds of negotiations, or that is in between those sessions, right? So just an overview on the mandates. We see inside of the resolution first that there is a clarity on the size and the severity of the problem on plastic pollution. There is a recognition that microplastics are included into the definition of what we understand as plastic pollution too. So then the question and the problem is domestic, is internal, but also there is a transboundary nature of the problem too. So it won't be we will find some specific provisions related to national circumstances and national competencies, but also some of the provision will be to deal with the transboundary problem, right? Then on the scope, we're talking about a full life cycle approach for plastics. And it's important to understand the word full because the question is when and where we start and where we end. And the beginning is exploration and extraction of fossil fuels or other materials that are the basis for plastics, to the end of life of plastics, right? So it's the full range of things and steps that happen in between them that will be covered by the treaty itself. And this is important to say, don't be confused with the term full life cycle of products, because this is a different exercise. It's a question more on the production and consumption side of a specific product and the resource energy and energy that needs a product. But this time, when we talk about the full life cycle approach of plastics pollution, is related to the different phases of the plastic whole cycle, and not just a question of plastic products itself. Then there is a need for complementarity. There is also a recognition of the ministerial statement that was adopted in and discussed last September 2021, and the work of the AHEC, that was the ad hoc expert group that met for 4 times in the last 4 years. And there's a recognition that I'm sure that we're going to discuss that in the future on the of NGOs, the private sector, and also waste speakers, and their relationship with other international conventions, with the Rio principles, with the SDGs, and the question of the need of collaboration and means of implementation is important to mention. Means of implementation is technology transfer, financial assistance, and capacity building. And the resolution requests to the executive director of UNEP to do 2 things: to convene the open-ended working group, that will be the group that will prepare the rules for the game, the INC, Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee, and then the forum that will be a forum that will discuss best practices that will happen back to back or at the same time that the first session or round of negotiation of the INC. Then on the content itself, or there is a laundry list or list with where states set kind of the priorities and kind of the specific the competence of the body. The main message is an open mandate, meaning that there is some list of things that need to be discussed, but also the INC can discuss whatever they think that is pertinent to discuss. But the priority will be given to a specified objective of the treaty. There were some attempt to have that already in the draft resolution, but there was not agreement on that. So they need to specify the objective of the agreement during the negotiations. Talk about a specific arrangement on capacity building, technical and financial assistance, and technology transfer. Then promote sustainable production and consumption, among others with product design and some waste management. But when I say among others, means also something that we are pushing for, that is the question of a significant reduction of virgin plastic production that can be included in this question of sustainable production and consumption competence. So there is also a question that we are going to talk in the future, or the different Emilia and Anna are going to discuss, that is national action plans, specific national reporting that will be necessary and core of the future plastic treaty. What will be a national action plan for prevention, reduction, and elimination of plastic pollution. That is the frame for what countries will need to do or to update when the treaty is adopted. Then a question of knowledge and education, information change, and then the promotion of coordination with different mechanisms, who is going to do what without duplicating efforts, and the question of different approaches. And when they say approaches, could be alternatives and substitutes that are affordable, sustainable, innovative, and cost efficient, and of course address compliance. You will see out of the round of the circle some other topics that are more related to the also is more a wishing list, the things that the committee need to committee, the INC need to consider also. For instance, the financial part with a dedicated multilateral fund, obligations, measures, and voluntary approaches. Flexibility will be also with the timelines, things that will be relevant for governments too, and a mechanism to provide this policy science and socioeconomic dialogue, right? There are some other topics related to human rights, for instance, the specific mention to and recognition to the role of waste pickers, and also how to integrate and how the INC need to discuss on lessons learned and best practice that come from their knowledge on dealing with sorting, collecting, and recycling activities. Then traditional knowledge of local communities and indigenous peoples. On health, there is a link with the different conventions, and also on the part of product design, there will be a question on additive, of course, and the toxic-free ideal of plastics, right? And the Rio Declaration with the specific principles that relate to public participation and to other topics that are relevant for us as civil society. And I guess I already talked 20 minutes, and I guess I'm gonna stop here. And if there's something I can.
All right. I hope everyone got a chance to hear everything and listen to the conversation that we had. That was actually last week's presentation. If you do have any questions, do post it up in the chat box. Perhaps Anna and I can try and respond to the questions from the presentation that we heard from Andres. In the meantime, Anna, would you like to take us forward with your presentation? Or maybe I'll give it a couple of minutes. If anyone has a direct question right now, you can raise your hand. Would love to hear your voice or even see your face. If not, you can type it in the chat box. Anna, are you there? Yes, you are there, obviously.
Yes, I'm here.
Clearly, I'm fasting. Sorry.
I'm also fasting, so.
But yeah, if no one has a question, would you like to take us through with the presentation?
Yes, I would love to. Yes, so let's go.
We can open for discussion.
Yeah, so I hope this introduction is helpful for people to understand basically what was discussed at UNEA 5.2 and how basically this resolution can be a game changer in terms of addressing plastic pollution as well as in addressing social justice. I think that's another thing that becomes very important here. So let me share my presentation, which is a continuation of the one that Andres gave. So here we go. So basically, I want to make some links here between what I just heard from Andres and then what that means in terms of us in the national context and in terms also of social justice. So, well, I work for an organization called NIPEFAGIO. NIPEFAGIO has been working for a long time now with everything related to plastic, everything related to waste management in general, including the implementation of waste management models that are better in terms of social justice, that are socially inclusive for low-income communities, like the zero waste model that we have. I'm going to mention this during my presentation. Just for the people who are not from Dar es Salaam, maybe to understand the situation on the ground here and why this matters. In Dar es Salaam, we basically have rivers being used as dumping grounds because we don't have a proper waste collection system, waste collection services for most people. So see, when people are asked why they have been dumping waste in the rivers, more than 67% of the people say that they don't have any other alternative. And we have done a drone survey back in 2019 that identified 2,048 waste spots along 8 rivers of Dar es Salaam, 1,250 of them being directly on the river beds. So what this means basically is that we are talking about a systemic problem that requires systemic change. Less than 40% of the households are estimated to have any kind of access to waste management services, and more than 70% of the people live in unplanned neighborhood areas. So this is in images what this means. So these are rivers. The river on the bottom is the Misimbasi River, which is the main river here in Dar es Salaam. So you can see that the situation is there. And when you think about low-income neighborhoods, this is and unplanned areas. This is the geography that we are talking about. So that means that we are not able to basically have trucks passing through in the middle of these houses to collect waste and everything. So a different system is required to address the problems that are in place. We have also done some mapping of illegal dumping in Dar es Salaam, and that gave us almost 10,000 trash spots all over the city. That is back in 2018. When you think about greenhouse gas emissions, which is also something important when you think about the climate crisis, you see on the graph on the left that the main contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in Dar es Salaam is waste, is the waste sector, which is the gray one. And from waste, like what kinds of waste? If you think about solid waste, we're talking about 46% of all the waste contribution, which you can see on the graph on the right. So if you want to address the climate crisis, you also need to address waste management here. And this is very important. This is an inventory report that was done by C40. When you think about the waste that we collect, so we have been doing marine litter surveys for a long time now and consistently. So this can show you a little bit about how it looks like, what kind of waste we find in the environment. And 76% of all the waste that we find in the environment is plastic waste. 42% of that is branded. So the magnitude of the problem is quite big. 75% you can see on the first graph on the left, 75% of all the waste that we find in the environment is locally produced, meaning it's produced by local companies, and 15%, 25% is produced by foreign companies. So you can see that, and then you can see a little bit of the different categories of plastic that you can find here and other kinds of waste as well. And you can see also that food products are the main contributor. You can see right in the middle, in this gray graph in the middle, food products are the main contributor to the pollution that we find in the environment, followed by household products, and then followed by personal care. If anyone, I know that I'm going fast through the data. If anyone is interested in seeing this data, you can feel free to send me an email or a WhatsApp message. We have reports on all of these and they are all publicly available. So whoever wants to know more about the data, feel free to ask and you have more information. So how does all of this connect with the discussion that we started with, which is the discussion of the resolution approved at UNEA 5.2? You can see the impact of implemented policy in a 4-year trend analysis that we have done specifically for Tanzania. So this graph shows a 4-year trend analysis of the top 10 types of plastic waste. And you see that the first one here, you can see that on the column, the first column on the left are plastic bags. Okay, so plastic bags in 2018, which is the blue portion of this graph, used to be the main kind of waste that we find in the environment. In 2019, in June 2019, there was a plastic bag ban that happened in Tanzania. So basically there was a restriction to the use of plastic carrier bags. And you can see, which is the green portion of this first column, you can see that the amount of plastic bags that we found in that year reduced by less than half. When you go to 2020, which is the red portion of this graph, you can barely see any red. That means that we barely found plastic bags in the environment in 2020. And then they started to come back a little bit in 2021. So basically, what this shows is that there is, like, when policy is restrictive policy to plastic pollution is implemented, there are tangible results that you can see from that. So that goes as well with the need for EPR. EPR goes for extended producer responsibility. One of the things that we have realized that generally when we produce, we have zero waste systems, zero waste models, we do zero waste implementation here in Tanzania and also in other countries in the global south. But about more or less 25% of all the waste that is collected from the households is residual waste. What that means is that that waste cannot be recycled, cannot be composted, is waste that just remains. And so that waste is waste that needs to stop being produced. And that comes with, as Gina was talking in the beginning, and then Andres was talking in the video, we need to address the full life cycle of plastics from production to disposal. So regulating packaging is key, as you saw, like a lot of the waste that we find in the environment is packaging, food products, household products, personal care products, these are all packaging. And the producers need to be accountable for what they are producing, because that releases the burden of waste management from the government and civil society, as the government and civil society are not benefiting, we're not making profits from the existence of those products in the market. So who is making profits should be the ones responsible for it. In the case of Tanzania specifically, you see that the two first names, which are Mohammed Enterprises and Baresa, are two local companies, and they produce more than 50% of all the waste that we find in the environment across the years. And so local policy, local restrictive policy in Tanzania could have a very significant impact, because 75% of all the waste that we find is locally produced, and more than 50% produced by two companies. It's important also when you think globally, 69 of the 100 largest economies in the world are companies and not countries. So basically what that means is that we have companies that have revenues that are higher than the income of entire countries, and Tanzania is one of those countries that would be behind some of these companies. And so basically they are producing, they are making profits, they have larger revenues than the revenue of the entire country. And at the end of the day, the waste management that is a consequence of their production is right now placed on the back of the country and not of the company. And I think that shows how unfair, and how also it's unfair, but it's also ineffective. As the picture show, we are not able to actually manage that. So basically, how can we do something about it as NGOs or as civil society as well? And then comes the social justice part. We can develop efficient models and bring them to action. That's something that NIPEFAG is doing in Tanzania, and I'm going to touch that a little bit later. We can do surveys, as all this data that I that I just showed you comes from surveys that have been done here in the country. And then the data from that surveys and the reports can be used by the government, can be used by civil society, can be used by the private sector. And then very important is to advocate for inclusive solutions that align social justice and environmental stewardship. In countries in the global south, in countries that still have high rates of unemployment, in countries where income is still very uneven or not well distributed, the waste sector can actually play a major role in making sure that people have access to income, have access to income generating activities, can basically provide for themselves and their families. And that's the social justice part that comes here. Just to give one example of that, the zero waste model that is being implemented currently in Dar es Salaam and now expanded to Arusha and very soon to Zanzibar as well. In less than 2 years, we have a 93% compliance to segregation at source. That means that people at the household level, they are segregating their waste at source into the categories that they need to do it to get it collected. We are able to reduce the waste that is taken to the dump sites in 75%. Now it's actually higher than that. We only have 9% of all the waste that is produced reaching the dump sites now. And there is a lot of people engaged and a lot of job opportunities. There are in one neighborhood, you can get actually more jobs than we were actually paying as an entire city when it comes to waste management. This is the model that we are implementing, and the way that it goes is that it's a cooperative-led model. And so there is opportunity for waste speakers to join. There are opportunities for women from the community to join, and also for our youth to join. So again, going back to the social justice portion of it, we need to promote the recognition of informal waste management players like waste speakers. Waste cooperatives now, we have been able to register the first waste cooperative in Tanzania. This is very recent. We are able to finish that registration last week. And so now they are no longer informal waste management players. They are somehow formalized as a cooperative. And we also need to promote waste management systems that address inequality and create employment. We need to make sure that all the knowledge that is practice-based knowledge that people have been doing and have a lot of understanding of what, like the situation on the ground, how to collect and everything that they do through practice, that's recognized. Globally, waste speakers are actually responsible for more than 59% of all the plastic that is recycled globally. So basically, we wouldn't be recycling anything if it wasn't for the work that the waste speakers do. The cooperatives are a great, basically a bridge, a step to remove them from informality without overburdening them with taxes and everything. So like they are not a company, but they are also not informal sector anymore, which is a great thing in terms of recognition. It makes it easier for the government to understand their presence and recognize their presence. So it's a good step forward. And then we also, as civil society, as NGO, we need to create visibility for the informal sector, show how important they are, what this role that they play that is invisible several times, but it's essential. We need to advocate for the policies like the one that has just been approved at UNE, and now we start a 2-year path to define how that resolution looks like, and then facilitate the appropriate work conditions for them to have dignity and health included in the work that they are doing. So this is a little bit of the waste speakers that we work with in Dar es Salaam. We have done some campaigns, so that we had a radio campaign, and especially in relation to COVID-19, I think it's extremely important as well for us to remember that we are talking about people that are collecting waste, and sometimes they don't have any kind of protection against viruses like the COVID-19 virus. So they are extremely at the front line, and they need to be recognized as essential workers, and also to be taken care of as essential workers. Going back to the social justice portion of the resolution, anti-plastic pollution towards an international legally binding instrument. So as you saw on the presentation from Andres, we have the paragraph 15 that says recognizing the significant contribution made by workers under informal and cooperative settings to collecting, sorting, and recycling plastic in many countries. This is basically the first time that informal workers, and which includes waste speakers and waste cooperatives, have been included in a global resolution. So this is something that I think everyone that was at UNE, including myself, is extremely proud of. And it was a huge celebration when this passed. And then we also have, in terms of indigenous people, the best available science, traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples, and local knowledge systems. Local knowledge systems also includes the participation of waste pickers and waste workers that, again, they have knowledge by practice, even when they don't have knowledge by education, formal education. So this is also recognized, and these two portions are extremely important. So what basically the pledges are in relation to production, and these are the pledges that we are advocating for in Tanzania, and that hopefully are going to be even stronger with this UNEA, the resolution process, the plastic resolution process. One is that producers must review their plastic production. We need to know how much plastic each company is producing. That should be mandatory. And that has been included in the APR draft regulations. We need to see what comes, like we were part of the discussion of the draft. Now we need to see what actually gets signed. The definition of EPR regulations, this is something that happened last year. The second portion of the last year, there were several discussions about this, and there is a draft resolution. I don't know, it was supposed to be released in the beginning of this year. It hasn't been released yet, so we need to see when they come and see what the difference will be between the drafts and then the final regulations. And we need to phase out single-use plastic. Single-use plastic is unhealthy for the environment, for people, for everyone. And so this is something that needs to be out. And then the pledges in relation to social justice come with segregation at source being mandatory in Tanzanian cities. That is already part of the environmental policies in Tanzania. Is the implementation of this that is missing, because you cannot implement that without having a system for collection. Cooperatives need to have mandated service waste collection. A huge step towards that has been taken with the registration of the first waste cooperatives, as I mentioned. And then waste pickers should be recognized as essential workers. This is extremely important, something that we all need to advocate for. And so basically the plastic treaty, which is what was the resolution that was initially approved at UNEA 5.2, becomes a huge opportunity for us to use global policy to influence local context, together with all the data and all the local work that is being done. And so we need to advocate for the domestication of the global agreements. We need also to bring the conversation and be talking about this frequently, even before the final resolution is defined, so that it's a path. Things take time, and we don't have as much time as we need. So that's basically it from me. Asante sana, thank you. And that's the end of my presentation. Gina, back to you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that. It's always, I've seen this presentation last week, and every time I see how much plastic there is there and how much we're contributing as Tanzanians, and the fact that we are producing it ourselves, just goes to show you that there's something that we can do here at hand. I mean, for instance, you won't be able to attack Coca-Cola from Tanzania, if that makes sense, but there are the Mohammed International Enterprise, there's Bahresa Group. These are the largest plastic producers in Tanzania. There's something that we can advocate for, extended producer responsibility. That is, that's a powerful step forward. And I think in the conversation that we had last week with Emilia, right before I give a chance to discuss, I think she mentioned something that's very important. We do want to bring the International Plastic Treaty and incorporate it into the Tanzanian policies. But the reason why, and the fact that you've asked for us to advocate and continue speaking on the plastic problem that we have in Tanzania, is the fact that how we, as a Tanzanian system, accepts the international treaty easily, right? She did speak about having Tanzania being a dualist state. That means it requires for us, and I think that was something that I just learned from last week, and I think for those who don't know, Tanzania falls under a dualist state, which means that we require a domestication process of any international treaty, Whereas countries like Germany, for instance, if there is an international treaty, then they just automatically, it automatically gets absorbed into their local policies. And that is why Anna was speaking about how we need to advocate. So just to kickstart the conversation, how do you think, what could be our first step? As Dina, I'm an environmental enthusiast. Anytime there's an environmental conversation, I want to be part of it. I want to hear, I want to learn and do better. What can I do where I'm sitting? Is there any petitions that I should be signing? Is there anything else that I should be doing further? Maybe you can kick us off with that conversation, Anna.
Yes, so basically there is a process of domestication of any global agreement. So the first thing is that Tanzania needs to sign the global agreement when there is one, and sometimes that takes time. And then after that, we need to domesticate that, which means that this is taken to parliament and there is a discussion that happens, and there is a like the writing of the domestication that needs to happen. And so one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that we push for it. So basically, the politicians, the governments, they understand that people care, because there are just so many things to do and there are just so many things out there. It's very easy to just skip one, you know. And so making sure that we are noisy and then we say, okay, this was approved and we would like to have this domesticated is extremely important. This can be done by social media engagement. You can tag parliamentaries in your comments in social media. You can tag representatives of the government on that. You can go to Twitter and talk about that. You can go to Instagram and talk about that. So there is a lot that can be done there. We have a couple petitions that we share as well. So we had a petition for the global plastics resolution that we were sharing, and we had I don't remember exactly how many, but we had a bunch of people signing it, and that was basically to push that at UNEA, not necessarily to push that in Tanzania. That was before UNEA. We have another petition now that is for a single-use plastics-free East African community. This is a campaign that we have been working with Nipe Fagio, and then there is Sejad in Kenya, JER in Rwanda, and BIVA in Uganda. It's 4 organizations championing these in 4 countries, because we want to take it to the East African community in Arusha, and to request an harmonization of all the plastic policies that we have. We have more rigid plastic policies in Rwanda, and then Kenya, followed by Tanzania, and then we don't have one in Uganda. So what we want to do is for, instead of the plastic policies to be defined in country, to become a regional thing, so that we can push for more, and so that as well one country doesn't end up negatively impacting the other. So if you want to see all these resolutions, all the petitions, all the opportunities for engagement, please follow Nipe Fagio on social media. We always post those on the social media, so you have the links there and you can find the resolutions, you can participate. We have a campaign called Plastic Yako Mazingira Yetu as well, that has several signatures and logos from a bunch of companies in the country, a bunch of organizations that are supporting that as well. And that is about making sure that producers are responsible for what they are producing. So there is plenty of opportunity for engagement. It just, what I would say is that if you want to have impact, the engagement needs to be consistent. It can't be a one-time thing, it needs to be consistent. I'm also aware that not everyone in this group is from Tanzania, but I think this would actually be the same in all countries. Mozambique, Kenya, and even people that are not in African countries. I think it's the same, like you need to look for organizations that are in your country, basically pushing for all of this, and then try to follow what they are doing and see how you can support.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm curious to hear, how is the situation I've seen this, a couple of participants from Mozambique, we have Kenya. are you able to unmute and perhaps tell us, maybe raise your hands and then we can introduce you to tell us how it works in your side. If there's any contacts that you can share for other people to whether it's social media platforms that they can follow, whether it's petitions that you know of that you can share with the rest of us, that because this is not just a single country's problem. And Anna, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the illegal plastic bag, the illicit trade between, specifically in the East African community, I'm talking about that, but it's so easy that our borders are so porous that plastic moves so easily. So it would be interesting to know from each area that you are from, do you have any contacts? Do you have any information? Maybe you can share it with us. Yeah, then we can wrap up if there's no more points or questions that you have for us. Anyone? No? Well, I see Mr. Alphonse. You've unmuted?
Yes, I don't have a
Yes,
question.
my
Yes,
apologies.
I,
Karibu.
yes, I don't have a question. I don't have a comment on that, but I'm just saying that this is wonderful presentation from Anna, and of course, and what has been presented also by the first presenter on the issue of plastics. Me, I had a question on have you managed, both of you, of course, separating the e-waste now, because now we have a big problem on the area of e-waste. And when I see all these figures, I didn't see anything on, I see a lot of plastic. Also in the e-waste, also we have a lot of plastics. And the way it's been deposited is everywhere. And you can see we have a lot of plastic there. We have a lot of things which actually is a major catastrophe. And because technology now is advanced, IT is improving a lot in this country, but of course in the region. So I was asking if there's any from Anna, if there's any material which has been managing to separate the e-waste, and those other, we can also influence some policy change and all this. I understand that I have a student who is working on that, a PhD student, but I would love to see what is at the state, what is available at the moment. That's my question.
Okay, so one of the things, and thank you for the question, and one of the things about e-waste is that, and that goes a little bit about like how recycling happens. There are things that are recyclable in one country and not in another. And that's one of the issues with e-waste, you know. We are not actually able to manage e-waste properly in Tanzania. We can recycle very little of it. There are things that we can recycle, but it's little. Yes, there is a lot of plastic, but there is also a lot of many other things, including hazardous waste in it. And we don't actually have proper facilities to do it. I don't have data specifically on e-waste. It's not what we find the most in the environment, and it's not what is being produced the most by the households as well. But I can say that extended producer responsibility has a whole session in the discussions that we had last year. There is a whole session about addressing e-waste and basically making sure that the companies who are putting the products in the market are able to receive the products back when the lifetime of that product is over. So this has been addressed in the draft of the extended producer responsibility. I think one of the things that we need to do now is to basically, it was supposed to have been released in January, and we are in April. And so I think we need to push a little bit for the extended producer responsibility regulations to actually be released. Otherwise, we end up taking the risk of the regulations getting a little bit softer than they were initially. And we only know what was finally approved at the end. So I think that's an important portion as well. But e-waste, including tires as well, tires, e-waste, so different kinds, chemicals as well, were all covered in the extended producer responsibility discussions, and they were all part of the draft. Now it's about making sure that basically they come back.
Okay. Yeah, is it possible, Anna, to connect the person who has asked the question, Anna Rocha, about connecting her with Anna Henger, because she's very much she can advise on the issue of how to connect, how to approach these issues of the government and all this. I think probably that is a good advice, and I'm sure you know Anna Henger, who is working with the legal. Yes, I think that is very important for her to see on how to follow it up.
Yes, and please connect me with anyone that you think is like always willing to connect with everyone that is working for similar things. And I think it's extremely important for us to work together, because nobody can achieve anything alone, especially in these particular areas. So what we are talking about, and I think I don't need to mention that a lot of the advocacy goes against the interests of very powerful people. And so we need to work together to be able to address that. I don't actually think that we are, I think basically what I think is that there are ways for the companies to produce in a more sustainable way that is not harmful to them. So nobody wants them out of the market. What we want is just for this to be better managed. And so there are many ways to collaborate that I think will result in a win-win solution. But in order to get there, we need to have our voices amplified, and that goes with working collectively.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna, and for that conversation, open as well. Does anyone else have a comment? Okay, I see Silvanos. Mr. Mingi, you've raised your hand. Karibu. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Mr. Mingi, we can't hear you. Nothing yet. Maybe you can go ahead and write it in the chat group. Let me put it in here. Okay, I think we can hear you now. Was it also you, Anna?
No, that was me.
Okay.
I was going to say that maybe he should try to restart his sound.
I'm also writing in the group chat. I need to stop saying group chat. In the chat box. Does anyone else have a contribution, has a question? We are hoping to wrap up in the next 7 minutes. So the final few minutes, we're here to, oh, Anna, you have a message from Francis. He says that number is too long. I don't think it is. Wait.
No, I just
No,
added
it
the country code, so that's maybe why, but that's the number. Ah, no, you're right. Wait, I think I need 1 second.
And also, please stay tuned for future, by following the social media platform, Nikafaya social media platform, you'll be informed of future webinars like this. There will be obviously presenters coming on board, like last year's, last week's webinar was very informative with Andres and Emilia. So please stay tuned. I'm not sure if okay, I see. Freddie, would you like to say something? Okay. Silvanos, are you here with us? Can you hear us? Nothing yet. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Carlos,
The message he wrote the question in the chat.
Okay, Carlos, just 1 second. I'll read Silvanos' message and then we can take you next. So he's apologizing because there's a told that in the social movements. I believe that's in Kenya, if I'm not mistaken. Can this technology be expanded? Actually, not in Kenya, but also here in Tanzania, right? A young lady called Anna.
This technology
Helena.
this technology is available in several places. The problem with that, so how can I be, let me be candid about it. So it is good technology when you think about a social entrepreneur who is then using the plastic to produce something that is income generating, and the plastic is already there, so they are using it. So in that sense, it's a good thing. The problem comes when the producers start to use this kind of technologies to justify plastic production.
Anna, I think we've lost you. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
No, you were lost for a second. You're back now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to justify then their production, which is obviously like ideally we wouldn't use plastic for pavement, because the truth is that even when you use plastic for pavement, when cars pass on the top of that pavement or people, they release microplastics. So we still have environmental hazards coming from that, and even from the process of doing that. So ideally, we wouldn't have the plastic in the environment, so we wouldn't have to do that. As we do have plastic in the environment, if you think about, again, social entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs that are using that opportunity to generate income for local people, that's more than valid and should be celebrated, but that shouldn't be used by producers of plastic as an excuse to continue to produce. That's what I would say.
Okay, and on that note as well, doesn't it require you to burn the plastic to begin with as well, to compact it? And that in itself releases, leads to air pollution. So, okay.
Yeah, it's not the process
good.
itself. And even if you think about making plastic bricks, which is something that we have been done here in Tanzania, or plastic poles, all of those, the process itself is a hazardous process. So the people who are doing it are actually exposed to inhaling the smoke from plastics and everything. So again, it's valid in terms of local entrepreneurship, but it's not valid when we talk about large companies benefiting from it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, Silvanos, for that question. It is important. Does anyone, Carlos did mention that he doesn't have a question. Does anyone else have any question? Any last comment? Anna, would you like to close us off with a final word or two?
Yes, I would just like to thank everyone for joining and to welcome everyone to engage. As I said, like, we need as many people as possible. We need people to be engaged. We start now a long process in terms of the UNEA itself, the resolution. And we need to make sure that that resolution goes well, that the waste workers are properly included in, like, basically throughout the resolution. And we also need to make sure that we can domesticate these, bring these outcomes to Tanzania. And also, who knows, maybe we can do more in Tanzania than the resolution is actually asking for, and we can become an example for everyone else. So welcome everyone to engage. I put my phone number, my email address in the chat, and with everyone, like, if we work together, we can go much further.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that. I see Stefano's asked if you have an office in Mwanza, Tanzania. I believe Nipe Fagio have an office in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, right? But
We
yeah,
have
you
a
can,
partner organization in Mwanza, so we do have people that we work with in Mwanza, yes, and we are planning to take the zero waste model to Mwanza by the end of this year, the latest.
oh, do you, Mr. Silvanus, it's Bainabaki, Africa on Coca-Cola Road. Yes, Coca-Cola Road. In fact, right opposite Anna's office is the Coca-Cola factory. She gets all her energy to write and do the research from looking at the window. Yeah, you can find it on Google. Just type on Google and you find it. We came from far during ban of plastic bags. Soon we will speak the same language about single-use plastic. I'm looking forward to the plastic straw ban. Super excited for that. One step forward. But just as a final point to close us off, as I said, I'm an enthusiast, and I think whether you are part of an environmental organization, whether you are in a civil organization, it doesn't matter where you're starting from. Every one of us has a responsibility. It can start from small things. Change the way that you consume things in your household, and you'll be amazed at how many other people that you've impacted. And you never know, eventually your whole neighborhood will stop buying plastic bottles. Not stop, but reduce the plastic bottle consumption as one of the things that we use often. Yes, Mr. Silvanos, I think Anna has put up her contacts. I'm just going to copy it again. Or Anna, can you please retype it? Okay, let me just copy and paste it again. But I'd like to thank
Sorry,
you all.
I sent it privately to someone. I'm sorry, I'm doing it again. Here we go.
But thank you guys so much for being here, and we hope to see you in future webinars, and stay tuned on the social media platforms. Have a lovely Wednesday evening. Thank you so much, Anna, for this.
Thank
You
you,
too.
everyone, and we'll share the recording and everything. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.